Vamos falar pouco sobre as vogais. Hello everybody, in this video we're going to talk about vowels, the oral vowels, and there's a reason why we refer to them as oral vowels. There are other types of vocalic sounds, but they in a future video I'll get into those. I don't want to make this video too long. But these we're just going to look at the five vowels that you already recognize from English if you're an English speaker. So let me just um, get right into it. So our oral vowels are the sounds that we're going to create with singular vowel sounds, and it's going to depend largely where in the sequence of the spelling of a word, of the pronunciation of a word, that it's going to have a specific sound. And with some words, some terms, you're going to realize that um, we just need to accept that that's the sound that's produced to elicit that meaning behind that word, because there will be words that have the same spelling and we just pronounce them differently. Say, for example, if we're talking about a verb and we want to talk about that verb, that action in the present tense versus the past tense, there may be situations, there are definitely situations where you're going to come across a word that has the same exact spelling, but ultimately where we increase or open or change our pronunciation for that particular vowel will change. And again, context will ultimately dictate those sorts of situations. But with just regular, I don't know, sequencing of letters and combinations of consonants and vowels to formulate different syllables in a word and create a whole word, we're going to have different sounds for the same exact letter. And it's not always going to be apparent visually why it's different. But we'll start with the first one here. The first word that I want to get into is the word sapato. And this is a good example of what I'm going to get into with the idea of where in the word are we going to increase our cadence or up our cadence, whether we're going to open up the sound of the vowel or just change the sound of the vowel according to that particular placement. And the word sapato, for example, it's the word for shoe. You notice that it has two A's in it, right? We're going to have an open A sound. That second A that's in bold here in my example is going to be like it's not quite like bad, but it's as close as I can get it. We have to accept that sounds aren't going to be always the same in one language to another. There are approximations that we can make. So the first one here, we're going to look at the word sapato, sapato. And I'm going to say this a couple times just so you can hear the difference in where this letter A changes from one syllable to the other. And again, you may not know where syllables are, but most of the time you're going to look at consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel. In this situation, we have a three-syllable word, sa-pa-tu. Okay? Sa-pa-tu. So just focusing on the two syllables that have the A's in them, sa-pa. Right? That's a different A sound. Sa-pa-tu. Okay? So why? Why do we have this different sound here with this at the syllable with the PA there? The reason being, and the word that I'm going to use here is penultimate. Okay, the penultimate, and I'm using that word because it's the common way that in Portuguese we'd use this word. It's the second to last. Okay, second to last syllable in Portuguese is the accentuated syllable always. Okay, or I shouldn't say always. Anytime you do not have any sort of other markers, accents placed on other vowel sounds, okay? Those will eventually be what dictates where you, one, increase pronunciation, up the cadence, or just change the sound from an open to a closed or to a circumflex or whatever. It doesn't matter what the symbol is, that's the one that you're going to focus on to make that change. It's where it goes from being kind of monotonous. Let me try this word sapato without doing that. Sapato, 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 sapato. That's not the word. Sapato is what's going to elicit somebody saying, hey, you're talking about a shoe. Okay? Sapato. So that penultimate syllable, that second to last syllable, is, as a general rule, the accentuated syllable. Okay? It doesn't matter which vowel sound we're talking about, that's going to be the one that's going to be accentuated if there are not any other indications of where and how to accentuate that syllable. So For this one, because it is our second to last syllable, that's why it becomes an open A. And when we get to a video on accents, because I'm not going to look at that in this video, I'm just going to talk about the vowel sounds without any sort of markers on them. Those sounds we'll worry about in a separate video. So for this one, open A sound, sapato. That's the open A, the pa in sapato. Okay, sapato. Now, if I want to look at the closed A, that's that first sound that you hear, the s, right? You can even hear it there. I'm not, you can't see me right now, and that's kind of purposeful. I want you to just focus on the listening part. S, s, that's the closed A sound. Sapato, okay? Sapato. So first A, s, closed, second A, pa, open. Sapato. And the O we'll get to when we look at that O sound in just a bit. We're going to look at the unstressed A here in a word like boca, okay? A little bit different than boca, and I'm not really pushing that much air out or just releasing that much air when I use that A. For the most part, you're going to be dealing with these unstressed sounds, and this is where I think it becomes a little bit tricky for non-native speakers or for learners of European Portuguese, or yeah, I'm going to say European Portuguese because Brazilians do pronounce these a little bit differently. It's here because these sounds are there on paper. You can look at that visually, textually, and you want to create that sound, boca, but it's not. In Portuguese, it's a very kind of reserved kind of language. People are pretty expressive in how they speak, but when we get to our pronunciation, we tend to eat our vowels. That's the term that we use, comer os vogais. Comer as vogais. We eat, comer as vogais. We eat our vowels, eat the vowels. And because we eat that vowel in this singular word, well, you have to figure in the context of a whole sentence, there's a word that's going to come after that. So whatever that sound is that comes after the word boca, it's going to be impacted by that unstressed sound there. So as you practice your sounds, it happens in the sapato as well. Sapato, sapato. I'm not going sapato, sapato, sapato. You can hear the sapato. That's the unstressed O when we get to that one. But for here, we're talking about A's, boca, boca. And it's like the in announce, right? Announce, 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 right? You can kind of almost hear like it's not even there. Like you expect it with that word. If you're an English speaker, you kind of know that it's going to be there because it's not really another, an ounce of bread. He made an announcement, announcement. Boca, boca. Okay, so it's that level of intensity that you're going to put into that. It's a very soft, almost just kind of like a breather between that book and whatever's going to come after that. Boca. So if I just like type out the word, I can't type it out here. I'm not going to do it. Boca aberta. So boca aberta, open mouth. Aberta, open. Book in that second letter, that second word is purposeful. I'm going to use an A sound because I'm really just going to combine that boca into the aberta. Boca aberta. Ele está de boca aberta. So that sound, that unstressed A for a lot of these singular words, again, in isolation, when you hear it in the context of a sentence, it almost sounds like that word blends in right to the next one. So an open mouth, I'm sorry, I should have used the right tools here for this to show you this, but I'm not going to start over. Boca aberta, boca aberta, boca aberta. Okay, moving on. And you can leave me comments in the chat below or send me emails, whatever you want. I'll get into it. If it requires another video, I will absolutely do that. So let's move on to the letter E, a letra E. Okay, so the letter E in Portuguese is pronounced E. Okay, you'll see later on that that's actually a word. It's the word is. It's the conjugated form of the verb to be, the verb ser. E. Okay, but as a letter, you're spelling out your name, like my name, S-E-R-G-I-O. Okay, so the letter E, E. The letter E by itself, without an accent on it, is also going to be a word. It's the word and. So, and this is confusing because when we get to the letter I, it's the same sound. But letter E in Portuguese, we're just talking about the letter E. So the open E, you're going to pronounce that like in Czech, Czech. Okay, the CH, when we look at that video and look at different combinations of consonants, we'll talk about that a little bit more. But this is the video that we're focusing on is on vowel sounds. So Czech, that's what it looks like. Czech, eh. That's the sound. That's the open E sound. Eh. Okay. But let's look at the closed E sound. And this is going to be in that second to last syllable. Okay. Second to last syllable here. Cabelo. Cabelo. And a fill. So it's more like an I sound in English that we're going to see here with this letter E when it's in that penultimate closed E sound word there. Okay, so it's not cabelo, because this is what I meant. Like certain words, you're just gonna have to understand, like this is the pronunciation for it. There's no accent there to tell you. Like there's no circumflex there to shut that, to close that down there for you. So you just gotta understand when you pronounce this word, cabelo, cabelo, okay? Cabelo. First one, open E, cheque, cabelo, okay? For the closed E. Unstressed is the E sound at the end of cheque. Cheque, cheque. And it's sort of like the magic E in English, the bake, bake, that k that you hear in English. Most of the time, you're going to hear that just air coming out. Shek, shek, bake, shek, bake. Okay, it's a lot like that. So in essence, we already do that in English. Some regional American English speakers may pronounce that slightly differently. I'm from the Northeast. It's bake. There's really nothing else that I can say about that. Uh, so that's our unstressed E sound, just that release of air. And that's the same for most of these, if not all of the oral unstressed vowels. It's more of a release because it's going to bleed into a second word, another word. And then there may be some changes in how that shek is pronounced, but we can't focus on that yet because we don't know what that next word is. But just know that these unstressed vowels are releases of air. When you have it as the first letter, as the E in the first syllable, it's going to sound like the E in eel, elefante. So elephant, elefante. Okay, and you have three E's there. Elefante, right? Elefante. Right, that unstressed at the end. That E that's after the L is kind of an unstressed too. Elefante, elefante. Similar there, but that first E, and there's a lot of words in English that you will, in Portuguese, that you will recognize as an English speaker. They're cognates, right? Portuguese is a Latin-based language. A lot of its words are going to come from Latin, but it's also a language that, in culture, that's been impacted by Moorish people that have, at some point or another, integrated and been a part of the culture. So there's going to be lots of words that begin with AL, for example, like algarve, or aziz, azeite, alentejo. So most words, no, I shouldn't say most, the vast majority of them may be Latin based, but there are going to be other sounds. You're still going to work with them the same way. But the ones that come from a Latin based background, you're going to recognize them for the most part. And my suggestion to you is, if you're somebody who's trying to teach themselves or trying to work on the language outside of a classroom, outside of working individually with a teacher, just using YouTube videos like this one, I want you to understand that you should go with your gut whenever you come across a word that looks and feels like something you know, because it probably is meaning the same thing. Now, there may be some very small percentage that are false friends, that they're not going to be exactly what you expect. But I don't know. I feel like you learn those as you go along and don't get too hung up on that. For the most part, if it looks like what it looks like, I would go with that. Okay. The letter I. Okay. This one's where it gets a little bit confusing because the letter I is you're, again, spelling your name. I have an I in my first name, Sergio. The I after the G, G-E-O, right? G-I-O, G-E-O. So the I is the E sound again that you heard in eel or in feet. So the word fita, it's not a cognate. It doesn't look like feet. It's fita. This is like a ribbon. It can mean a ribbon. It could be a fit, right? So actually, as a fit, it kind of is sort of a cognate. So E, it has an E sound. There's really not much else in terms of differences. There aren't going to be a lot of words that end in I's to have that unstressed I sound. So you're largely going to see this word as an E sound, right? Fita, fita, okay? Our O's. You're gonna have an open O, like in that penultimate syllable in that two-syllable word. Loja means store, but it's the same O as in the word lozenge. Loja, loja. Okay, loja is the open O sound. Closed O sound, and this is a perfect example of what I mean. Like, we just have to internalize that this O in each one of these words, they're both in the same placement. It's a two-syllable word, but the word that we're going to see here with poço, poço is in closed O sounds. The O in torso. Poço means a well. Okay. Now, the reason why I think this is the case, and pronunciation-wise it changes, is a word that's Posso. That's the word posso, and it means I can. It's the verb for poder, the verb poder, to be able to or can, or to have the ability to do, power to do. It's also the word for power, poder. But as a verb, when we conjugate that, put that in the first person, I can, eu posso. So it's more like the ó in loja, but that's an SSO word. So again, there's not a super common word that you're going to use. I don't know. Maybe you need to use the word poço. Maybe you're agriculturally minded and you live in a village and you need to work on your well. The key factor is you just have to learn this word as you learn it, and I'm teaching you right now. It's going to have this closed O sound. O. Poço, poço. Okay, the O in torso. Okay. One way to get good at this is just to listen to as much Portuguese as you can, transcribed reading and listening at the same time, so you can start to internalize and program your brain to understand that that word, that sequence of letters right there, just like that, is going to produce one sound, where the other word that I mentioned, the Posso, is going to be more of the open O, posso. Okay. So back to the same word. Now we're going to focus on the unstressed O at the end. It's the same thing I mentioned before. It's just like a release. Posso. 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 Yeah, if I'm going to say this as quickly as I can, it almost isn't even there. Posso. Posso. I'm going to try to eliminate the O altogether, and just so you can just POC with that little thing underneath it there. This is a cedil. This is a particular letter. It is a C, cedilha, the cedilled C. It just sounds like an S. That's all you need to worry about. When you see that, it sounds like an S. And they're going to come largely or mostly, if exclusively, before O's, A's, and U's. Not so much U's, but mostly O's and A's. If you see a C by itself, without that little symbol underneath, a little squiggly there, before an E, it's also going to have the S sound. So this C is for when we have an O or an A or a U that follows that C, the cedilled C, okay? Because a C with an O or an A or a U is going to have a hard K sound, okay? K sound. Like in cabelo up here. Cabelo, right? K, not sabelo, cabelo, because it's CA. So, but these words here, we have the cedill posso. Now that last word there, pos. I'm just going to say the POC without the O. Pos. Upos. Pos. I'm going to really highlight the S, the S sound. Pos. Pos. But it's posso. 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 But again, in natural speech, that sound's going to, it's almost not going to be perceptible depending on what comes after this word. Finally, finalmente. Oh, it's the posso is the U and zu. But again, it's unstressed, so it's not going to be really that highlighted. It's not going to be something you put a lot of emphasis into. It's not going to be. It's not going to be have that emphasis on that syllable. So it's going to be the previous O that gets the emphasis. Posso. Okay, posso. Last one here. Letter U, letra U. That's how you pronounce it. U. It's like the U in lute almost always. You don't really have to worry too much about this letter. It's a U. Luta. That A at the end is unstressed. Luta. Luta. Not luta. Luta. Okay? Luta. Okay? So again, Portuguese people eat our vowels. I find this is probably one of the hardest parts of acquiring Portuguese, European Portuguese in particular, because we do not really highly emphasize so many of these vowels either at the beginning, like in elefante, 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 and the E at the end of elefante. Right? Both of those letters have modifications to them in real natural speech. And I don't mean this like in the context of a classroom. Your teacher, if you're taking this at wherever you're taking this, if you're working with me one-on-one, if you're working with me in a classroom, I'm going to try to pronounce those to show you how you should say it, but I'm then also going to use it, in my opinion, this is how you should go about it. Listen to it how it's going to be said, because that's how it's going to be said. And teaching you otherwise is just delaying the inevitable. You're going to have to struggle with this idea of where one word ends, where the next one begins, because Portuguese people do not use space bars when they're out and talking to each other. Okay, it's going to almost sound imperceptible that these are there, but they are. And again, read, write, listen. All of it has to happen in sequence and in conjunction with one another to really reinforce these different aspects of language, right? Okay, so the U in Portuguese is largely silent in some cases. I didn't bring that up before, but might as well do that now. But this is not that different from what you already know in from English, right? Some words have a qua sound, like quack, right? Quack. But if I use a word like quintuplet, right? Or even, yeah, quintuplet's a good one. Um, Sometimes you're going to come across sounds where that U is silent, and it happens with G's and Q's. So we have in the word kill, which is kind of we should have a kill here, but kill um, is I'm going to put this in, like an informal contraction of that one, kill, or that he wanted. But just the sound is really what we want to focus on here. K, k, k. So it's k, I, k. So you don't do the w sound. Or in quinta, quinta, same thing. It's the word for a farm, quinta, quinta. So it's the Q is largely silent, and it's going to happen with G's as well. This is the word for war. You probably see the word gorilla is related to that. You're going to have to, I think, if you want to expand your vocabulary, you're going to have to trust your gut. And the more vocabulary that you have from English, you're going to have an easier time identifying words in Portuguese or making connections between words in Portuguese and your presumable native language of English. So the word for war, guerra, guerra. And the double R, again, we'll worry about that in a different session. But for right now, we're just worrying about the G-U-E. Just skip the U there. Guerra, 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 okay? And the last one here is the same way you're going to pronounce it. And again, purposefully use the word that I think you can identify what that means. Guitarra, guitarra. That's a guitar. And the first word, again, is the word for war. Guerra, guitarra. So G-U-E's, G-U-I's, you're largely going to work with these right here. When you look at Q-U-A's, just like in the word quack, or in Portuguese, the word like the number 4, quatro, then naturally you're going to have a different sound. There's going to be more of a w sound. But for Q-U-E's, Q-U-I's, the U's are silent. All right, we're going to stop there in this video to not make it too long. But I hope this is helpful. If you're interested in learning more from me or learning with me in your journey of European Portuguese, I hope you check out my website. It's lowkeyportuguese.com and or lowkeyportuguese.pt, whatever works for you. And just want to put this out there that in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be launching a new venture. It'll be in conjunction with my website, but ultimately I want to try to create a learning community for anybody that's interested in learning European Portuguese, where I will be posting the vast majority of the resources that I've created. I've written a few educational books, a few didactic books, textbooks, and just general resources that I think will become helpful to you in starting to think in Portuguese. Because to me, that's ultimately where we're all trying to get, right? Wherever we're learning a new language, it's not just about learning new words or learning new sentences or phrases. I think if you really want to learn the language, you want to learn to think in that language. And you will see that culturally that kind of shifts who you are, and not in a bad way. I think it's always good to have different perspectives. And if we can look at the world from a different perspective, I think it just makes everything better all around for everybody. More than one perspective never hurt anybody. I think it's only beneficial for so many reasons. And yeah, so this community is to join like-minded people. If you're interested, leave me a comment below, and maybe there'll be some goodies for the people that join up as the early adopters. So leave me a note in the comments that you're interested, and I'll send you something to make sure that you get something in return for being interested in my learning community. So we'll be calling it Conversa Club. And based on the word again, these cognates that I think are really important. The word conversa is the Portuguese word for conversation. E clube, Conversa Club, or we can kind of anglicize that and make it Conversa Club. But in good Portuguese, Conversa Club or Clube de Conversa with low-key Portuguese. So again, leave me a comment in the link below. Subscribe to my channel, and leave me a like. That's always helpful as well in my journey on YouTube and on social media and trying to promote my stuff. And the more that I can do that, the more that I can reach out. And if it's all worthwhile for everybody, everybody benefits. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Check us out. Até a próxima. Ciao.